Which is the best camera and the best lens for wildlife photography? In this video, let's explore various cameras and lenses and try and understand which one is best suited for you. Listen to this. The latest camera that has been launched might not be the best camera out there for wildlife photography. Let me repeat that. The latest camera that has been launched might not be the best camera for wildlife photography. Every camera manufacturer has various grades of cameras starting from entry level to semi-professional to professional. So the latest camera that's launched might be a beginner's camera and that might not have all the specs necessary for wildlife photography. So let us first understand the crucial specs necessary to click super sharp pictures of wildlife. Now I can just start throwing names of cameras and lenses that are suited for wildlife photography, but in doing that I'll be robbing you of your journey. Instead, what I'm going to do is enlist the various specs of cameras and lenses that are important for wildlife photography so that when you're exploring various options, you know what to look for. I'm Girish Menon and I just show up on your screen and start talking about photography. I post new videos all the time that will help you to click better pictures. Please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out. One of the first things that I look at in any camera is the number of autofocus points. The more points, the better. I find that a camera needs to have at least 39 user selectable focus points to qualify it as a camera worthy for wildlife photography. The more points that I can choose from, the more options I have with regards to my compositions. Along with the number of autofocus points, the next most important thing is the autofocus speed. I need a camera and a lens that can nail focus quickly in challenging situations such as low light and when clicking pictures of birds in action or wildlife in action. So when you're researching cameras and lenses, have a look at what people have to say about the autofocus speed, because that can be the difference between getting the picture or not getting it at all. When clicking pictures of wildlife, we are almost always clicking in the burst mode. So when we have our shutter release button pressed down all the way, the camera just keeps firing away so that we don't miss a single moment. There are some cameras that do 8 frames per second, and that's something you can consider if budget is an issue. But if your camera does only 5 or 6 frames per second, most often that's not sufficient for wildlife photography. So look for a camera that can do at least 10 frames per second. Weather sealing is an important requirement because most often we are clicking in very dusty conditions, and if a camera is weather sealed, it can resist dust and moisture, and you can even use it in light rainfall. Now let's talk about lenses. I find that when clicking pictures of birds, I need a lens that's at least as long as 500 millimeters. Even 400 millimeters can fall short. Here are some pictures that I clicked with a 300 millimeter lens, but such opportunities are few. Focal length is not the only important setting in a lens. We also need to look at the widest aperture value on that lens. You can have a 300 or 400 millimeter lens with its widest aperture at 2.8 or 4. Similarly, you can have a 500 or a 600 millimeter lens with its widest aperture at 4. These are super sharp prime lenses specially designed for wildlife photography. When I consider a zoom lens, I want to ensure that the widest aperture on it is at least 5.6. You might think there's not so much of a difference between 4 and 5.6, but the difference is huge. At 4, the lens takes in 2 times more light as compared to 5.6. And at 4, the background can be rendered completely out of focus. I clicked these pictures that I showed you earlier with a 300mm prime lens at f4. That's why the background has been rendered completely out of focus. At 5.6, that background will not go as out of focus unless the distance between the subject and the background is significant. If your subject is significantly closer to the background, then the background will be sharp, and that takes one's attention away from the main subject. I clicked this picture with that same 300mm lens at f4, and because the bird is so close to that background has not gone out of focus. There are some zoom lenses available that go all the way to 600mm, but the widest possible aperture setting at 600mm is 6.3. 6.3 is not wide enough in low light, and that background is not going to go significantly out of focus at 6.3. It's okay when you're clicking pictures of birds against the clear blue sky, but if you have some level of clutter in the background, it's going to be very difficult to isolate your subject from the background at 6.3. Let us recap everything that we've discussed in this video so far. When you're researching cameras for wildlife photography, you need to look at the number of focus points, the frames per second it can do, ensure that the camera is weather sealed, and that the camera has a super fast autofocus system. When considering a lens, you need to decide whether you want a prime lens or a zoom lens. If you want to click pictures of birds, you need a lens that's at least 500mm long with its widest aperture between 4 and 5.6. So now you know more about cameras and lenses for wildlife photography. That will help you to click better pictures. I have a couple of videos on my channel about the Canon 7D Mark II and the D500. Watching these videos will inform you whether these cameras are relevant today.